James Mirtle, Senior Managing Editor of The Athletic. Good morning.
It's a rare Monday show for us here.
Yeah. I need to get you off the top this week because I need closure with some of the Dubas conversations. Before we get into that, though, what do you think is most improving with this team to you?
Most improving, like throughout the year, so far?
Yeah, don't you feel like over the last week, like 2 weeks, that they've sort of unlocked something here, that they are playing better? Because again, there was the Columbus game, but you look at the rest of the body of work and you say, damn, they do stack a lot of points. We made a lot about the regulation wins, I think rightly so, but lately this team does feel like it's coming together a little bit more.
Yeah, I mean, I think a big turning point was the decision they made to get Reeves and Klingberg out of the lineup, and they're playing Calgary and Vancouver in those games, and those were two of their better performances, and it feels like for me since then, the switch has flipped a little bit.
I think it's more than that. I think it's a guy like Max Domi is finding his footing a lot more. His minutes are kind of pretty similar, but I just feel his impact more night in, night out. I think that Tyler Bertuzzi is also really finding himself in this market, and that people, I don't want to say misunderstood his game, but I think had really, 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 really high expectations of Bertuzzi coming in here because the offseason was pretty underwhelming. It was, oh, crap, what are the Leafs going to do? Oh, crap, what are the Leafs going to do? And then they get Bertuzzi on this contract, and everyone's like, okay, this is the best. Oh, my God, can you believe that they got Bertuzzi on this deal? What a steal, what a steal, what a steal. And they came in, it was a bit of a slow start, and he was a whipping boy for the coach, and he didn't really fit on that top line seamlessly the way that we all expected him to, where it was just going to be Zach Hyman 2.0. And now I'm seeing a much better version of Tyler Bertuzzi. I'm seeing a guy who's starting to play way more comfortably with this team, who really does have a defined role with this team. Feel the same way about Max Domi. I think James's point is a correct one, that those two guys being removed, but I think it's a little overstated considering Reeves was playing, 6 minutes a night. They did get a goal from Bobby McMahon. To me, it's like a lot of guys on the team are just sort of finding their footing, more so than I think it is just like, hey, they removed 7 minutes of a forward and a broken defenseman that, I think was eventually going to get replaced anyway.
Yeah, and not only that, but you get the depth contributions with the injuries with Legason, Benoit. I mean, obviously Joseph Woll is one of the stories of the season, but even Martin Jones comes in and plays well. And who could have seen that you would be getting so much from these pieces just coming in basically from the Marlies and playing key minutes for them right now? It reminds me a little bit of last year, November. They had all those injuries on the blue line. Everyone was kind of doomsdaying what was going to happen with them, and they played pretty well. And maybe it is that you take so many different pieces from last season, it's going to take time for them to integrate with the rest of the roster.
Yeah, I've just been impressed. I really have been. I've been really impressed, like a night in, night out. Outside of Columbus, I've just looked at them and said, this is a way tighter team. These guys are playing with way more connectivity, and I'm feeling the force of certain players a lot more. I've had some, disappointing moments, but it's an 82-game season, so like you're gonna have those moments. But ultimately, like I'm respecting the body of work a lot more than I did when it felt like analytically, across the board, they were pretty middling, and in fact, maybe a little below average in a lot of spots. And it felt like, boy, they're getting lucky with some of these points. They're getting really lucky with some of these points. I would say that the last 2 weeks, last week and a half, it's felt like, no, a lot of these points are very, very deserved. And you look at some of the things that they've had to overcome, whether it has been the Woll injury or, like not having Matthews on Saturday night and Brody, and just still cleaning the Penguins' clocks. I'm saying, yeah, all right, time to lavish them with a little bit of praise. By the way, do you feel like I don't want to say the worm is starting to turn, but like the narrative in terms of people appreciating Tree Living's offseason is starting to have a pretty significant uptick? Like that part of it is, the two guys you mentioned are removed, gets a little fortunate with that. But now you look at it, and the Leafs had such better depth than Pittsburgh had in that game, and that was sort of supposed to be Kyle Dubas' thing, and now it's become Brad Tree Living's thing.
Yeah, but I mean, look at all the injuries that the Penguins have. Like, you talk about an AHL roster. They're playing a chunk of AHL players there on that forward group. So, I mean, the biggest struggle for the Penguins this year is they can't score. Like they defensively going into that game, I think they were 5th or 6th in the NHL in goals against. So the 7-0 loss is a little bit of an anomaly for them.
Did you see what was being written about Ryan Graves after that game?
Yeah, I know.
Yeah, because he was the savior. A lot of people wanted him on the Leafs, and they said, boy, that's the signing that Toronto should have had.
I didn't see anybody talking about Ryan Graves in the offseason.
What? That was a huge thing. People went, Dubas nailed this guy down, and he should have been a target for the Leafs, and he would have helped balance up the lineup. And it's like he's getting walked by Matthew Nyes, and the people that are writing for them are saying that he should be up in the press box, that he should be sitting. Like, this is actually a point of curiosity I did want to talk about with you today is, do you think that there's again, it's very, very early on in the season, right? And there's going to be some element of this where people go, man, Evgeny Malkin's getting older, and they've got Chris Letang who's getting older. But Kyle Dubas remade that entire bottom six. Kyle Dubas is the one that brought in Ryan Graves, who, again, people are saying should be benched right now. He gave Tristan Jarry that contract extension. He took a big swing on Erik Karlsson. Like, he remade a lot more of that roster than people want to say it.
The Penguins are what we thought they were. I mean, they missed the playoffs last year. No one thought they were going to be a contender this year. So the play there for them is take a long shot at getting something out of the next year or two with Sidney Crosby. And if that doesn't work, then you're looking at a rebuild. And how that's going to work with Malkin and Letang and Karlsson and Sidney and everything, I don't know. Like, that's a complicated thing to all of a sudden move into a rebuild. But that's where they're at. And that's the role that Kyle Dubas took on, was it's going to be really difficult to turn this into something that's going to be a contender this year.
I would argue that if you get Sidney Crosby playing this well, your team should be better. And that if you built this much of the roster, you could have done a much better job at building it out. If this was Toronto, I think that people would be making that case. I will say this. I was talking about this with Bomani Jones a couple of weeks ago, how it was like more in relation to the Golden State Warriors, how sentimentality is one of the new things in sports that actually really hampers a team. It really hurts a team. Where you look at some of these just awesome star players who have done so much for an organization, and you say, well, how can you move off of Klay Thompson, right? How can you move off of Draymond Green? How can, after being a dynasty, essentially, a modern-day dynasty, I know people don't like to throw around that word, but in the salary cap eras, for these teams to win this much, how do you turn your back on these players when they're asking for money? And it's like we've seen it we saw it with the Blackhawks when they started to dole out the contracts, like the Brent Seabrook one was the most famous of them all. I know that the flat cap has obviously hurt some of these teams, especially in hockey, but I look at the Penguins and say, damn, this is now seemingly becoming a price of winning, where if you win, you might end up hurting your post-winning window because you have to dole out these past performance contracts, because it would feel weird to watch Evgeny Malkin in a different sweater, right? And all of a sudden, it's like Sidney Crosby is helping calling the shots, and if they go to him, of course he's going to want Malkin and Letang to stay. Of course he doesn't want those guys to go.
Yeah. I mean, San Jose is another one. Washington. You know, you get these teams that had success. In the case of San Jose, they didn't end up winning the cup. So that puts them in a pretty tough position where you've got the Vlasic contract, and, you know, they've been able to move out Burns and some other pieces. But, you know, the flat cap, if you're a winning team and you're an aging team, you know, the cost of doing business has been the Seabrook contract. You know, and you can see a team like Tampa trying to push against that. You know, there's this battle potentially with Stamkos over his next contract, and they've moved out a lot of players depending on, but even for them, it's been hard for them to stay competitive. And that's just the landscape right now with the hard cap. And the right decision for Pittsburgh is probably to tear it down and start again. But like I said, I don't know how you do that with Crosby there, as you said, that wants to keep winning.
And I mentioned this on Leaf Stock, but it's impossible to trade Sidney Crosby. Like, you just can't do it. No. You cannot do it. There's no scenario outside of him saying he wants out. And there's nothing about Sidney Crosby that would ever have indicated throughout his career that he would ever be giving that indication to the organization. Okay, so
it would be kind of cool, though, JD, to see him in the Mario Lemieux role with the next one, if they could find a way to do that. Like, can Crosby play another 4 or 5 years, and potentially the last 2 of those years are with a kid that they picked in the top 3 or something, and he can be kind of in the mentor role, and the Penguins can start another ascension. I mean, I think that's kind of where they need to start directing their focus right now.
I agree. It's just heartbreaking because you watch him play, and there's just he's awesome. He's genuine. Like, how many players do you think have been better than him this season? 3, 2?
He's a great player.
Yeah.
You know, hopefully that World Cup next year is a good showcase for him, because you're right. I mean, he might not play a lot of meaningful hockey the rest of the way.
That's it. And, you know, I don't like the player movement of the NBA. I love it when guys see it through their entire careers with one team. It really does make me feel awesome. But Yeah, this one is a little heartbreaking, knowing that Sidney Crosby is still performing this well at 36, and Ovechkin's what, 2 years older? A year
Yeah.
older? He's somewhere in that ballpark, right? He's a little bit older than Sidney Crosby is, even though we do think about them as, exact polar opposites to one another. But Sid's playing this well and just individually trying to carry his team. And I don't think, last I checked, this is off the top of my head, but I am tracking it very closely. Last I checked, Ovechkin has now gone 12 games without a goal. And out of his 5 goals this season, only 3 of them have actually been on a goaltender, right? And that's someone we thought was never going to age and was always going to be scoring goals. And so for Sid to still be doing it at this level, I'm so impressed. I really want to watch him compete again. I want to see Sidney Crosby in the Stanley Cup playoffs. Frankly, I'll admit it clearly. I don't want to see him on Kyle Dubas' team. Success. Okay. Was there a tribute for Kyle Dubas? Because we didn't see it on TV, and I don't know. There wasn't, right?
No, there wasn't anything.
Did that surprise you at all?
A little bit.
Yeah.
They did something for Lamoriello, right, when he came through?
I can't remember. I'm
pretty sure they did. I recall being in the building, and I think there was some sort of, although maybe not. I mean, that divorce wasn't exactly amicable either.
Uh-huh. But what does that tell you?
It tells you everybody's moved on. I don't get the sense that there's a lot of, even Sheldon Keefe, who's been close and played under Dubas for so long, said, you know what, honestly, I'm not even thinking about this at all.
Yeah, but that's obviously a lie. That's obviously a lie, James. They have to be thinking about it. There's just no way that they couldn't. To me, it says almost the opposite. If you've really moved on, then you can be happy for your ex, right? Like, if you've really moved on and you've put it behind you, then you say, hey, Kyle, welcome back to Toronto. Hey, Jason, welcome back to Toronto. I actually think that would have kind of been the petty thing, is just to lump them in together, just do like a quick video tribute for the two of them and say, hey, guys, thanks for your work. Quick clap, get a couple of boos from the crowd, but then move forward, move on. But I thought it was a little strange. And it did make me think that if I was looking at it from the outsider perspective, that there was probably still quite a bit of bad blood between those two sides, and that nobody's buried the hatchet. Nobody's had a conversation amongst each other going, yeah, I saw your side now and I see it a little differently and I wish things didn't play out that way. But yeah, best of luck in your new venture.
Yeah, well, I don't think there's bad blood between the players and Dubas or Keefe and Dubas or anything like that. It's at the top of the organization.
Yeah, that's what I'm talking about. That's what I'm talking about. So yeah, you think that's still there?
I don't think that's ever going anywhere.
So it's irreparable in terms of the way those two guys communicate. Because you would think that at some point and someday, like the Yankees and Red Sox do business, that those two parties are just like, they're never picking up the phone with one another.
Well, Trey Living is a neutral party in this situation. Like, he doesn't have anything against Kyle Dubas.
Yeah, but you know who you're dealing with when you're making that call.
Yeah, it'd be interesting if they do make a trade.
Yeah, it would be fun. They used to make some trades, right? Dubas used to love making the odd trade with the Penguins.
We'll see. Maybe the Leafs still want Achari.
Yeah, I don't know. He's hurt right now, right? Like, he didn't play in that game. Okay, so that brings me to this. And I know that, we talked a little bit off air, but when Dubas left, you reported, you did a great piece up on your site about, hey, we're going to continue to see fallout from this. This isn't over with just like the departure of Jason Spezza. And a lot of us, even watching the draft, we felt like, oh, okay, what's going to happen next? Who's the next one to go? Tree Living's not on the draft floor. Are they letting someone run their draft who might not even be here 2 weeks from now? How is this going to work with Pridham? How is this going to work with the rest of the organization? There are apparently a lot of Dubas loyalists within the building, and that there was a fracturing. And then that just seemingly went away. And now the Leafs do seem pretty stable. I'm curious what your read is on all of that.
Well, 4 people left. Yep. Dubas, Spezza, Belfry, Elkin were the people that left. And what I was told is that some people were happy at staying in Toronto with a contending team. Either they had families or they didn't want to leave. And then there were a lot of people that were under contract that didn't want to leave. So I don't know if there's still going to be an exodus that happens over the next 2 years. Maybe we'll see more people move to Pittsburgh, but maybe not. If the Penguins fall into where they're not competitive and the Leafs continue to be a contender, I think looking at that, Toronto's a pretty good place to live. It's the top city in the NHL in terms of market size. A lot of people are being paid above their standing compared to around the league with the role they have. So that's part of why you have a lot of people wanting to stay.
But Yeah, it does feel smoothed out then, is what you're saying. Like money, so basically just money is making everything fine.
I mean, if you're under contract
Mm-hmm.
and you can't break your contract to go somewhere else, then you're not going anywhere else. So there's some people in that situation, but I think Tree Living did a good job of coming in and being a peacemaker and cleaning the slate for a lot of people and giving them opportunities, and that's what you need to do when there's a leadership transition like that.
That's why I always thought that the Sheldon Keefe contract extension, like that was what it was really all about. It was extending the olive branch and proving that, hey, okay, two things. It was two things can be true. I think that you were still extending him because you thought, hey, who were you going to replace him with? It wasn't exactly a deep field of coaches that were available at the time. So you looked around and said, all right, there's no ready-made replacement. It didn't seem anyways from everybody I talked to that Tree Living had a guy that was in mind, or I never heard one anyways of somebody that was really out there that they were interested in. But the secondary part of it was finding a way to get common ground with a guy who was brought in by Kyle Dubas, who was very much, at the very top of his, his guy or his guys, and you made peace with him and you started to kind of smooth things over and then show that you had that stability moving forward.
Yeah, I mean, the Keefe thing was interesting because if you really wanted to go scorched earth and change the regime and everything, he was the one that was the most connected and had the most history with Dubas.
Right.
So it's interesting that he stayed and that he's happy in that role and that he's extended and that there was that faith shown. But again, I mean, Shanahan and the Leafs wanted to keep Dubas as well. I mean, that's why there was a negotiation that happened there.
Yeah. I think that it was like, hey, if he can smooth it out with Sheldon Keefe and get Sheldon Keefe to want to be here and show that there's an extension, that's like, hey, bygones be bygones with everybody. This is a fresh relationship. It's a fresh start. Everybody can find something there. If Keith is available, he serves as a figurehead to all the other guys in the organization that had their doubts whether or not they would be given an opportunity to show themselves as more than just like quote unquote Dubas guys. Anyway, all right, moving forward you got any other thoughts from Dubas being here over the weekend and Shanahan and all those guys?
I mean, can you imagine how hard it would have been them for to sit in that press box and watch that game?
Yeah.
It was painful.
It's awesome. What? It's true. It's like Leaf fans really enjoyed it. I think it was a very, very small minority of fans that weren't gleeful about what was going on there.
It's interesting that Dubas became one of the most polarizing people I've ever seen in being around. I've been around the Leafs for 20 years, and I've never seen anyone, I don't think, that's that polarizing in that role, which is interesting because they've had some terrible GMs and huge mistakes have been made.
But that was it. When those GMs made terrible mistakes, there was just a consensus amongst the fan base of hating the front office. And the difference, there was two things. I was actually thinking about this, I think last night, about how Kyle Dubas gets a bit of an unfair rap because I think part of this is just the time we live in, right? It's just, this is way more polarizing times. Social media seems to amplify things and make us think that there's more divide amongst us than maybe there actually is, right? If you're sitting at a sports bar, and I've done this before where, I had a guy that worked on the show that was a huge Dubasite, like would be talking up these prospects that we'll never see here, right? Like he'd be the Ronies and the Topes and he would be talking about these guys like they were this next wave of incredible talent that was going to be showing up for the Leafs. Like just to the point where, giving credit for things that either have not happened yet or way too much credit for something that did, right? And way too many excuses for things. Like there was a faction of the fan base that seemed to tie their identity into Dubas in a way that I've never seen with other general managers. Like no one looked at Brian Burke and said, this guy represents me, as a hockey fan. And I think that ended up happening with Dubas. But either way, I think the social media stuff played a big part of it. I think that just the pressure of the team and the time and the expectations and him just being the face of, well, why isn't this getting better? Because this guy was supposed to have all the solutions. He was the prince that was promised type of guy. They moved off of Lou Lamoriello. The contracts went poorly. It just divided the base in a certain way. But yeah, I think that that's the major point of relief is that you don't have this discussion amongst the fans anymore. There are people that debate the Tree Living moves. There are people that debate whether he's had a successful start to his Maple Leafs tenure. But it does take a little bit of the pressure off. And weirdly, at the time, I thought this is super strange because Shanahan had a target on him at this point too, right? Is like they moved off of Dubas, and it felt like it was a big pop from people when he did the whole like, if you're not 100% a Maple Leaf, then you're not a Maple Leaf at all. And people were like, yeah. But then ultimately it's like, okay, well, you're the architect of this stuff. You're the common denominator across all of these different teams. And yet I do feel like, at least from an optic standpoint, it has really worked for Brendan Shanahan.
Yeah, but they need some success though, JD.
I agree.
If the bet that they made was on keeping Keefe, keeping the core, bringing in Tree Living, and if they fall on their face in the first round again, there's going to be tons of heat on that front office.
I agree. But do you think that it's a all-in situation?
I don't know. I mean, it'll be interesting to see what they do at the deadline here and how aggressive they are. Do you just light a whole bunch more picks on fire? Do you trade a Minton or a Cowan to try and make something happen? Or is it something more measured than that? Because the concern you have when there's pressure on the front office is that it's pick up the furniture and start selling it and do everything you can to win in the moment. And that could do some damage to the Leafs in the medium term.
Yeah, this is my gut feeling. Elliot Friedman did report on his 32 Thoughts podcast today that the Leafs are not inclined to move Minton and Cowan, which makes sense because they don't have much beyond the two of those guys, right?
Yeah.
And so, yeah, clearly you want to be able to try to keep your best in-house assets, and that if you are moving off of either one of those two, it's for a massive, massive swing. You're not just like flipping one of those guys in a trade for an aging defenseman that is going to not have term. That's what they want. I was talking to Elliot actually when I was hosting the pregame on Friday, and he mentioned the same thing, that's what they're looking for. So something with term if they're going to be going all in. Again, my feeling as of right now, the points that they've accumulated, the way that the rest of the NHL looks, the needs that I feel like they have, but also just the landscape of a ton of parity and not a lot of sellers and some of the prices being a little too high and the assets that the Leafs have there's not that same pressure to add like there's been in years past. I think that a lot of us are bracing ourselves for potentially a first-round pick for Chris Tanev because they don't have the second. And it, like what you would assume that his market is going to be enough that someone is going to be willing to pay a price that's close to that for the Leafs, especially if their first-round pick is a later one, which it looks like it's going to be. But, I don't know. I don't see the major splash coming this year. And as much as I agree with you that there will be a huge, huge, huge target on everybody if they fall flat in the first round again, I don't feel anyways like the pressure will be everybody's got to go clean house and bring somebody else in right now. I feel like it'll be like the next year will be the all-in, okay, now you've got to have it year. You've got to move off of a Marner. You've got to execute that kind of trade or get the Nylander contract done. And then that's it. That's the one.
Yeah, I think there'll be major changes on the roster if they fall flat again. I
agree, but not in the front office.
I don't know. I don't know what's going to happen. It's been a long time for the Shanna plan, right?
Yep.
So it depends how ownership and the board feels. Do they feel like moving off of Dubas was enough of a move and keeping the same roster and the same coach if they don't have success? That's really the bet that Shanahan's making here, is that running it back again to a large extent. So if it doesn't work again, it feels like it's on that group.
Okay, so now to the actual team, the dynamics with the group. What do you do in net? Because Martin Jones, it's a very small sample of these guys playing right now, right? But the team has looked better with Martin Jones in net, and he has more of the Woll qualities, which is like calm, rebound control, big, not letting in any of the awful ones, like we saw from Samsonov in the Columbus game, where I think I said it seems like he has holes in his body. And yet the case for trying to get Samsonov was that he's not going to be challenged in the net. He is going to have some runway to find his game. And so I'm torn between the two things of, do you just go with the guy who looks better, but is not going to be the solution? Or do you sacrifice maybe some points in the standings right now in hopes that Samsonov finds his game, knowing that that's the higher upside play?
I think you give Samsonov a couple more chances, but probably what you're looking at right now is a tandem, right? Like you alternate between the guys depending on how it goes. I'm assuming Jones is going to play against the Rangers tomorrow just with how well he played against the Penguins. Then they've got some easy games coming up. You can flip one of those to Samsonov and you cross your fingers and you hope he looks better. And if he does, then he gets more chances. And if he doesn't, then Jones gets more of the net.
Yeah, but that's kind of the scenario that I'm outlining is the dangerous one in terms of continuing to lose him from a confidence standpoint. Like
Yeah.
if your bet is, hey, Samsonov eventually is going to be better than Martin Jones, and hey, Samsonov did do his best work last year when he didn't feel challenged by Matt Murray and the net was just his and his alone, that you're saying, hey, who cares about the results? We're sorry, Martin Jones, you played great, you had the shutout, but Samsonov's the guy, you're playing him Tuesday night, and maybe you're even playing him like a couple of games in a row.
Yeah, I just don't know how you can do that with how he's playing right now, though. I mean, you can't. Can you throw your team under the bus and just forfeit games? You need to see a little bit more from Samsonov before you're saying, hey, you're going to get a run of games here.
Yeah. The thing is like the first game that they played with Samsonov in net, the Nashville game, they really tightened the screws defensively, especially as the game went on, and said, all right, we're not going to let this guy be tested in horrific ways. And then the Columbus game happens and he's in net and he was brutal in that game. Like again, the goals 3, 4, and 5 against him were about as bad as you can see from a goaltender in the NHL. Like truly, truly, you've lost your game, you've lost your confidence, you've lost the team's confidence. That type of dreadful. Didn't get pulled, but whatever. And I think that was actually something too, that they just left him in the net and was like, no, this is your mess, clean it up. But I almost do feel like there's some obligation from the team in front of him to just say, hey, this is one of our guys. He was with us in the postseason last year. We need to make sure that we are tight while he's in the net and help him find that too. The way that they've done, like they've been better in front of Martin Jones.
Yeah. I think that's fair, but I also think that there's this, it's almost like the Michael Hutchinson situation now where the team in front of Samsonov is like, when is this guy going to let us down?
Totally.
And there's just not a lot of confidence in front of him right now, and that's a problem.
Yeah. That's what I mean. I think that there's a real dilemma here. I think it's a tough one. And yeah, you figure if it's the Timothy Liljegren timeline or something close to that, I think Liljegren missed 6.5 weeks, right? Which gives you plenty of time before the deadline to figure out what you have in Woll and plenty of time to see if Martin Jones actually does look more than serviceable as a backup. Like if this actually continues, then you feel totally confident in not having those two guys. But yeah, then it does bring into account, hey, what happens with Samsonov here? Like, does he end up actually getting waived?
It could happen. Or he could be money that you shoot out if you need to create some salary cap space. Or the other thing they could do, JD, is they could carry 3 goalies for a while. Like we're seeing that around the league this year more than I can remember. Buffalo's done it. Detroit's done it. They're going to have the cap space with the Klingberg money where they could carry 3 goalies for a month if they want to.
Well, I was going to say that actually, maybe that ends up turning out to be a benefit for them. Is that they have the Klingberg money, but then also if they're asking to move off of a contract or take something big on, they're just saying, hey, take the Samsonov contract. It's expiring anyways. How much? Like, this isn't Peter Mrazek, right? Where you're asking a team to go take multiple years of a guy that's well overpaid. This is just, you got to get him through the season and then you can say goodbye.
Yeah, and at the deadline, you're only paying a quarter of his salary.
Right.
So it should be relatively easy to push that out if you need to.
You know what? So maybe actually I'm coming around on this. Maybe the spin is that you're really hoping to make Martin Jones feel comfortable and you don't want Samsonov to find his game because the ultimate upside of Samsonov is to use him as, salary cap filler in a bigger trade.
If Woll is as good as he's been this season, a Woll-Jones tandem is not the worst idea.
Yeah, I don't think it's the skill for me. It's just the can he stay healthy question, right? Like that's it. Because, I was looking at, I think it was Money Puck. Yeah, Money Puck posted this. I actually have it here. If you're looking at, the way that they evaluate goalies with their goals saved above expected and goals saved above expected per 60, right? Like they have Joe Woll as a top 10 guy this year. And like he's there in both categories despite only, playing in 15 games. Like he's been as good as anybody in the NHL other than, Thatcher Demko is very much the top. Jonathan Quick is there too. But you look at his numbers and he's almost in line with like the Connor Hellebucks of the world, which is, pretty awesome for Joe Woll. So I think the talent is there. The team looks good in front of him. It's a lot of injuries for a young career. And I do wonder what the conversation would be like amongst the fan base if you ended up having another injury before the playoffs and you said, oh, wait, Martin Jones is your only goaltending option and before you have to go to the AHL.
Yeah, that's definitely problematic. So maybe you're playing with fire a little bit there. I mean, Woll has had a ton of injuries. So, like I said, maybe you go with the 3 goalie option. And then right before the deadline, you need to decide what you're going to do.
Yeah, but I think if you do that, you still have to find a way to bring in some other goalie. You know, like there's got to be some other depth piece within the organization that's between, like, I don't even, who's the next guy?
Well, Hildeby's been amazing in the AHL, but he's 22 years old and has never played at this level.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I know some people that really cover junior or the prospects are very, very high on Hildeby and what his future could potentially bring. But yeah, my 22-year-old goaltender, ask him to come up with the weight of the expectations of this market on his shoulders. I'm not really ready for that. Anyways, James, thanks for this, buddy. I always appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks, JD.
See you, pal.